In order to stop the Lion's viral weapon, the Dark Knight will need to take an unexpected trip to Metropolis. But is Bruce already succumbing to the courage that kills? Well, let's hop into the pages of Detective Comics issue number 1103 and find out what happens next together, shall we? So then, this issue actually opens up far away from the Dark City Knights of Gotham City, and instead we find Superman duking it out with the heavily armed forces of Intergang in Metropolis. This is all pretty par for the course when you're Clark Kent. Of course, things end up taking a turn when Oracle ends up radioing in and saying that Batman is in trouble. It would seem that after his fight with the Lion and Kaznia in the previous issue, he ended up passing out at the wheel of the Batwing. And wouldn't you just know it, saving him right now is most definitely a job for Superman, even when the Batwing has all sorts of security protocols in place to make sure this very thing can't happen. Now, Superman doesn't need to have X-ray vision to tell that Batman is really messed up right now. His face is broken, and that's even before they breach the subject of Bruce being infected by the Lion's bioweapon. Here's the thing though, Batman is most certainly ready to take help right now, but not from the Man of Steel. Instead, who he really wants to see is actually Lois. You see, back during his big fight in Kaznia, Batman managed to glimpse some letterhead from Star Labs, and Lois just so happened to be writing a big expose on rogue Star Labs experiments that got themselves shut down. Furthermore, in a very wholesome turn, Batman admits that Lois is probably the greatest investigative journalist in America today, and you know, he's something of an investigator himself, so this is a real case of game recognizing game. And you know what, we don't get a lot of Batman-Lois team-up, so this is definitely something I'm glad Taylor has been playing around with here. Lois agrees to take Batman along as she works some of her Star Labs contacts. Though she is very adamant if they are going to be teaming up on this, then they are going to do this her very particular way, and the comic does go out of its way to really highlight why Lois is such a good newswoman, how she builds rapport with people, appeals to them on a personal level, but more than anything actually gives them the opportunity to try and be good for themselves. Of course, Batman is in a major rush right now. He's got less than 24 hours before he'll have to quarantine, and as such, he decides to move this along by being, well, his most Batman. Now, Dr. Lee, a Star Labs scientist, reveals that several very suspicious deaths across Metropolis are actually connected to a highly mysterious new star project that just so happened to be getting some majorly suspicious outsider funding from an individual who brought the idea of conquering fear to the scientists. Did we also mention that all of the scientists involved in this project, save for one, just so happened to die recently in a series of what looked to be ridiculous accidents, drowning while swimming, crashing their car, and not pulling their parachute in time while skydiving. In a truly hilarious twist of irony, apparently the only scientist involved in this project who is still alive just so happens to be an agoraphobic man. Batman and Lois make trails to this guy's apartment only to show up too late. It seems that the very same heavily armed intergang thugs have also grabbed this scientist with the also important information. Batman doesn't think twice though about throwing himself right into the fray. Sure, these intergang guys might be tough with their alien armor and weapons, but stuff like this needs a considerable amount of power, and one EMP pulse later, and all the goons are doing is wearing some very heavy costuming. You would think the Doctor would be happy that his life was saved, but hey, who's ready for a little twist here? Turns out the scientist in question wasn't actually being taken hostage by Intergang, he was selling to them. And because the Doctor would appear to be getting high on his own supply, the agoraphobic man opts to try and take a header out his own window. Once again, Batman very recklessly jumps out the very same window to try and save the man, a fact of which even in his internal monologue he notes is something he wouldn't normally do. It would seem that the courage virus is already working its way through his body and changing the way that he acts. All the more reason to try and wrap this caper up quickly, right? Once the scientist is properly restrained, he starts singing like a canary. Apparently, the courage that kills only began life as a virus, but they've actually had a bunch of different breakthroughs. Now it's a special performance enhancer going by the codename Fortis. Get it? The Latin word for brave? That's what those Intergang guys were shooting up with to try and hype themselves up to go and attack Superman. Which naturally takes this whole bioweapon problem and makes it a lot worse. Batman looks through this guy's files and eventually ends up coming upon a chemical compound that is all too familiar appear to him the sort of thing that you would find in Dr. Jonathan Crane's Scarecrow gas. Obviously, Batman figures his next stop should be Arkham Tower to try and question Crane, but hey, as we saw in the previous issue, Crane was actually kidnapped from the tower by the Lion's men. Surprise, surprise, but Lewis King actually knows Jonathan Crane, and he figures the best way to truly test Fortis is to see if it can actually allow him to overcome the Master of Fear himself. He also gets some pretty good digs in, completely dissecting the Scarecrow as a character. Oh, did you knit that mask yourself? Did you cut out your own eye holes in the burlap? Geez, I knew Fortis made you fearless. I didn't know it also helped you write a tight 5. No, well, Batman is ready to run off and follow his next lead. Lois, great journalist that she is, offers her own insight. Mainly, don't you think it's a little strange that you found a plague ship that called you out by name, then found a letterhead in a Kasnian base, and now evidence that just so happens to implicate one of your oldest costumed foes? Why, it's almost as if the Lion has actually been hunting you this whole time. But of course, the Courage virus is already pulsing through Batman's veins, and because of that, he's not really willing to do that much thinking as the comic comes to a close. And so that was Detective Comics 1103, everybody, and once again, Tom Taylor is probably turning in one of the most consistently enjoyable Batman books on the shelf right now, which is saying something, especially when the Matt Fraction book has set the bar so incredibly high. I hope people don't ignore this one, because Taylor is really doing some really awesome work here. We've gotten a series of cool new villains, and even some fun shakeups to the classic character dynamic. I didn't know I needed a detective story featuring Batman and Lois Lane, but man, if it wasn't a fun read. Really helps make the world feel big and lived in. I like the idea that this story and Batman himself can really go anywhere and do anything. Hell, if they can manage to nail the landing between the secret connection between the Scarecrow and the Lion, I think we might actually have a new villain with some legs here who's worth sticking around and maybe even getting some play in other books. Overall, I would give this one another 8 out of 10. Just some good, consistent superhero stories. Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Cape Joel again, thanking you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, why not check out my Amazon link down in the description. Yes, that's right, the Cape Joel channel officially has its own Amazon storefront now. You can pick up a comic or anything else for that matter, and if you did, you'd really be helping me in the channel. So with that out of the way everyone, I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.